welcome back, you guys. This is the Art School Graduate Podcast. Today's guest is a designer, educator, podcast host, and all-around creative force. From the military to the classroom to the mic, his journey is anything but ordinary. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest is Joseph Bullard. Joseph, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here. Yeah, and first off, just thanks so much because you have some pretty incredible guests on this podcast, like Maurice Cherry, Dr. Cheryl D. Miller, Gail Anderson.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know why I'm here, basically, is what I was thinking all day today. But I appreciate it, man, and I'm grateful.
You're here because your story is interesting, man. Like, not many people can go. I think I've spoke to one other person who's gone from military to creativity. So I like when I hear that, and then your work is dope. Like I'm not gonna sit here and act like you're nobody, but like your work is dope. So I'm like, this guy has a very interesting story to tell. So I just was like, let's do it. And shout out to our man, Russell, for connecting us. This is a big thank you to him for this. But let's just jump right into it. You have such a unique story. Like we were just saying before, blending military service, design, and education. So how did working in the U.S. Army shape your outlook to push you into creativity and design?
Well, it definitely shaped that, but I think in very indirect ways. However, I did discover design while I was in the military, and that's a big part of this creative journey that I'm on. Was finding it through being in the military. And I found it while I was downrange. I was deployed in Iraq for 15 months and just literally in Baghdad, and came across like a cracked version of Photoshop. I'm in that club of people who are old enough to need to acquire a product key.
Yeah.
And it was for CS2, like the entire creative suite. And I stumbled across that, and I think I had heard of Photoshop. So I started playing around with it, and I had a friend. I'm originally from Texas and grew up in Austin and around Austin. So music is a huge part of my life and my years as a teenager. But friend that needed a music flyer, like a concert show flyer. And I was like, I can do this, and it's creative as a kid to, a certain extent. But I would say that's how the military is shaped outlook on creativity and design, was simply because I discovered design through my time in the military. I think most of all, it shaped how I talk to people, especially people in positions of authority.
Okay.
And that translates into this industry very well. And I teach, I'm an educator just like you. So it translates there as well. But I think it's had more of an impact in that world, how you can talk to people, how you can do that effectively, and just around communication altogether.
So like people skills, it really helped that part of design, which everybody seems to forget. That's kind of like important.
Yeah, it's very important.
Like reading and writing is going to take you extremely far in design. And I feel like many that are up and coming, they kind of lose that because they're so hyper fixated on, I got to make it look good. I got to make it look fancy. If it looks good, they'll say yes. And it's like 9 times out of 10, they're just going to read your little brief and say, oh, okay, let's give this guy X amount of dollars to do this job.
I don't know. Did I mention leadership? I think that's another big area where the military has influenced my outlook on things, is that it shaped the way I view leaders and leadership. And for me personally, there's a big difference between a manager and a leader.
Okay.
And
break that down for us.
I think it plays out in the corporate world all the time, where you have people who may be unqualified. I used to work at Dell, like the computer company Dell. And there's a lot of people that just get by for 15, 20 years. And it's like really hard to get fired from Dell. Not anymore with all like the tech layoffs and stuff. But back when I was there, it was really hard to get fired from a place like Dell. Like you had to really try to do a shitty job, to get fired. And then even then, they'd be like, hey, we're going to move you to this other team. Like it's almost like they were scared to fire people.
Oh my God.
So what happens at a place as big as Dell is you have people there that have been there for like 10, 12, 15, 20 years that are just phoning it in, right? They're just checking boxes. And there are people in leadership roles who are not leaders. They're hardly even managers. They're
Mhm.
definitely not the people that you're going to follow, like
Right.
to the end of the road. So it really shaped the way I view leadership in those ways because I was around both good, great, and bad leaders in the military.
Mhm. So let's take a step into like entering the design world for you. Like you just shared, everybody started off with that cracked version of CS2. I did the same thing. I've shared this before. I think I met this guy at a KFC and we just put it on the computer. He put the code, the 16-digit code in, and I was up and running. And he said, just don't connect it to the internet so they won't find out. So let's looking back at your early like design experiences. Like, what was your time like at Mark English Design? And how did that help you with like building your foundation as a creative?
I'd say that was the first place I worked after school. It was like I had just graduated, and then a week later, I was interviewing with Mark English, a very small studio, but a big name in Austin at the time.
Mhm.
He was the founder of the AIGA Austin chapter. He founded a design conference called Design Ranch, which still exists to this day. So this is like the mid 90s. He's originally from like the Boston area, but had he came to Texas and settled in Austin, doing great work. I knew of him as a student. So I just took a shot in the dark. A week after I graduated, I applied for a position. Wasn't really expecting to be called in, but he did. Interviewed with him. And then like that weekend, I was working on something for the University of Texas and like throwing out logo ideas and working on real work.
Mhm.
And it was fascinating to work with him because he's the type of person that always has something cooking.
Yeah.
Like he always has something up his sleeve and he's super thoughtful. Everything in his life has like this, he connects the dots between everything across his entire life.
Right.
And he's studied like petroglyphs and he's been in the deserts of Morocco. He's been all over the world. So he's a very cultured person. And I think most of all, how it affected me in those early years was that it just showed me how to be thoughtful.
Mm.
And I think I was always a thoughtful person to begin with, but seeing the way his thought process worked influenced the way my brain was working at the time. And I started to cue in and sort of tune in to how I can connect dots in my own life or connect dots between client work and personal work, or even between two clients, really anything under the sun. But I did it through our conversations. So the conversations we had there in his studio, and then when we would go and just sort of interact with people in the creative community in Austin, which is very strong, super talented, and very competitive. He gave me a chance to meet people that I wanted to meet because he sort of had a hand in creativity, for me from every direction.
Yeah.
So I think most of all, I learned how to be more thoughtful just by our conversations or from those. And he also shared student work. So he's a design educator. He's taught for many, many, many years at places like SCAD and the Art Academy. And he would have students send him physical pieces to like the studio, and I would unbox them and unpackage them and get to see the work firsthand. And at the time, you know, I went to a community college,
Right.
which is also where I teach, but it gave me exposure to design work coming out of like a 4-year university and multiple universities also. And then he would ask me my thoughts about those pieces. And that was super helpful because I used that knowledge to sort of create the foundation that I use in my classrooms when I'm speaking to my own students. And I knew I wanted to teach at the time. I just didn't have the experience to do it. But that was super helpful to sort of look at all that work and then to get his feedback and then for him to ask me questions about my thoughts about the work. And then we just had really cool stuff to work on. We worked on a couple of projects with Richard Linklater. One was for Hulu. It's a series called Up to Speed, which you can still find on Hulu. And then we did a project. It was a poster design for Slacker 2011, which was basically a remake of the original Slacker by Richard Linklater. And then these skateboard decks behind me, a company called Mark Skateboards. So just really cool, fun projects to work on straight out of school that you wouldn't expect to get your hands on, period, because you have zero experience.
Yeah. Did you feel his trust and confidence in like bringing you on kind of helped give your spirit a little boost as a wet behind the ear, fresh out designer? Because I know sometimes you can get in those spaces and your hands are up like, I don't know what to do. It's like full Ricky Bobby moment. I don't know what to do with my hands. Like, what should I do? So did that confidence he kind of poured into you help you a lot?
I think so. I think I might have been a little overconfident as like a fresh graduate. And I got put in my place really quickly because I mentioned like that first weekend, he sent me home with like a 5-inch binder. And it had all the stuff in that project leading up to that moment. And he said, "Hey, go dig through this and then come up with some logo options and then email them to me over the weekend." So I was like, okay, cool. Wow. This is super interesting. And I was super
Yeah.
hungry at the time. So I started working, right? Doing the stuff that I thought was cool. I sent him, I think, 3 options by like Monday. And I got a 1-word response from him.
Oh no.
It just said no. That's all it said. And then that sort of, that's when I had the moment of like, oh shit, what did I get myself into?
Right.
Maybe not that serious. I've only had that reaction like once, and it was in the military. So
Mm,
this isn't up on that level, but it's because of what I did in Baghdad that I had like this oh shit moment. Like, man, what did I get myself into?
mm,
This wasn't as serious as that or as
yeah.
impactful as that, but it was a moment that I was like, oh man, this is already going in a way I didn't expect.
Yeah. What was like some influences that you were pulling from and drawing from during this time you were working with him?
Well, that's an interesting question because I didn't have the internet at his studio.
What?
Originally, we did because we were in South Austin, like on South Lamar and Goodrich. Anyone who's not from Austin will sort of know where that is. But shortly after I joined his team, we moved out to Driftwood, Texas, which was like 30 minutes out of the way in the woods, like out in country.
Yeah.
And there was no internet on the computers that I had access to. He had the internet, but he was paying for it in like increments, by the gig. So I didn't have an internet access there. So I don't know where I was pulling from. He had a lot of sort of archival things that I
Yeah.
could dig through, books, like older stuff. I mean, this is decades beyond the stuff that we were sort of tuned
Yeah.
into as students in school. So I was digging through that. He had a lot of music, a lot of vinyl album covers. So I would sort of dig through those, a lot of
Yeah.
poster, a lot of African art in his studio. There were things to be inspired by, but it was difficult as a recent grad because there was no access to the internet. And we all know how heavily we all can sometimes rely on the internet just for like
Yep.
some visual spark or inspiration.
Yeah.
I did have internet on my phone, but it was pretty spotty, like the internet service I could get. So some of the research I was doing or discovery was happening when I wasn't at his studio, when I was back home and I had, free access, unlimited access to the internet. And then I would sort of do that like in the off time and then come back with like some fresh ideas. So it was pretty difficult.
Yeah. So let's talk about like a little bit. Did you pull a little bit from like your cultural heritage, knowing that you're 40% Indigenous American? How did that help with some of your like design ideas or options? Or were you even able to implicate those into like works when you're in his studio space?
Definitely not while I was there.
Mm,
I wouldn't even say I do it at all. Like, I don't think it's ever really shown itself in my work. And it's a tricky question because there's a tricky history and like there's tricky context behind all of this. And my identity is tricky to begin with because I don't know who my biological father is.
ooh,
And I've been searching for him for like the last, I don't know, 4 years maybe, like off and on for the last 4 years. But I'm that kid who knows that they're Mexican American,
mhm.
who had stories of Native Americans in their family, Comanche, Apache, things like that. So most of my life, I just wondered and had no real proof of any of that besides like some really half-assed family lore that was being passed down.
Mhm.
So that has always been a barrier, not knowing who my biological father is and not knowing an entire half of my family tree has always been that mental barrier between me and fully accessing that culture. So my maternal side, I know quite a bit about now since I've been digging, trying to find out who this biological father is.
Mhm.
So I know some about that now, but that only started in like 2020.
Oh, wow.
Most of my life, I knew the person on my birth certificate. I found out when I was about 10 years old, the person on my birth certificate isn't my biological father through like parental DNA testing. And then my mother thought who my biological father was, and she told me his name. And so most from maybe the age of, I don't know, 15 to about in my 30s, I thought it was this guy.
Yeah.
It wasn't until my partner Meg bought me like a 23andMe and an ancestry.com test so that I could try to find out like how much
Yeah. Yeah.
indigenous DNA I have, because I was interested in that, like how much,
Yeah.
right? Like I know it's there, how much. She bought those tests, and then all of a sudden that just sparked everything.
Mm.
And now I had this new drive to find out who he was because I got a little taste of what it's like to discover some of your ancestry.
Mhm.
It was fascinating.
Mm.
And I wanted to learn more, but I contacted that guy who my mother said was my biological father, who she thought it was. We did a DNA test, and turns out it was negative. So that sort of undid everything of like the past 15 years. And I was like sort of starting back at square one. And I'm sort of still there. Like we built a lot of family trees, where we've targeted some second cousins and first cousins and built out their family trees to find a way to connect it to mine.
Yeah.
So a combination of traditional genealogy, but also DNA genealogy to try and figure that out.
Mm.
But to sort of, close out my response, that's always been a barrier for me because I'm that kid that doesn't know how to identify, which
Mm.
is also fascinating because, I claim to be able to help people visually identify themselves.
Mm.
But there's always this thought in the back of my mind of how the hell can I specialize in identity design when I don't even know who the hell I am, or half of
Yeah.
who I am. So it's interesting internal dialogue, but
Yeah.
that's always been something that's clouding like the heritage and being able to connect to it fully.
Mm. I
So
see.
at the end of the day, I wish it was visual in my work.
Mm.
And it's something that I want to work on in the future, especially with passion projects and just personal work. I want to try to find a way to infuse that visually so that it's a little bit more obvious that there is some type of culture behind the work.
Got you. Oh wow. Thank you for sharing that. That was deep, and I appreciate you sharing that. I just want to encourage you, man. Like you're a great man. I pray you find him on this journey, but I still think your work is dope. And I think you do have a story to tell. I just want to encourage you in that. So don't feel like you can't. You totally can, bro. You're totally in the space where you can help affirm any and every design you do because you have the tactical skills. Don't let it be because of some other clouded judgment. I just want to encourage you, man. Like
Yeah, it's
I
great advice.
I appreciate you just being vulnerable with us with that. So let's take a turn into education and mentorship. So I know you mentioned that you're a teacher at Austin Community College. So what motivated you to teach? Because you did say you knew you wanted to teach, but you didn't know how to get into it, and plus you didn't have the years of experience to do it. So what motivated you to go towards like, you know what, I need to inform the next generation so that they can be better than me. So what pulled you towards that?
I think mostly stumbling through how to do things and not having the greatest resources to turn to and find answers, right? Because these are well before the days of YouTube and YouTube University and being able to learn so easily for free. And it was, before the days of Christo in the future and
Mhm.
so much content available for free
Yeah.
that you could easily teach yourself at home. It's before those days. So I think most of all, it's like, hey, I can probably help students not make the same mistakes we made where they
Gotcha.
were students. And I have a desire to do that. And I think I naturally just enjoyed the critique process and giving people feedback and trying to think about the work objectively.
Mhm.
I think at the end of the day, I think that's the answer is I always knew. I always knew and I always had this drive and I knew exactly how to do it. I
Mhm.
just couldn't do it. I went directly to the department chair at ACC and was like, "Hey, I want to teach." As we're graduating, she's like, "Are you serious?" Like, "No, you need some experience in the industry. Like, go get some experience and then come back." And I did. Yeah, 7 years later, I went back and the same person that I went to originally is the person that
That's
gave
cool.
me a job as an adjunct professor.
That's
You
cool.
know, and she taught me one of the most important things I've ever learned about teaching before I even stepped into a classroom.
That's so dope, man. That's amazing. I'm glad she kept her word and let you come back in.
Yeah, me too.
So what is your goal? Like what do you hope to instill in your students when they come through your class and when they leave your class?
I think mostly how to talk about your work,
Mm.
how to talk about your work effectively with confidence.
Yeah.
It's one of the most important things that I feel students can learn. I also think it's one of the most important things you have to be able to do as a creative professional is speak about your work in an intelligent way, but also speak about the purpose behind your design decisions. So, what I focus on in my classroom is trying to teach people how to think like a designer,
Mm.
not always how to make the prettiest thing or how to make the most visually appealing
Mhm.
thing. It's like, hey, let's slow down and let's just talk about like how we're thinking about solving visual problems.
Mm. Yeah.
And a lot of the time, we're not even solving just visual problems. We're solving all kinds of problems,
Yeah.
you know, that because there
100%.
there are usually bigger things happening that the client may not understand if they've never worked with creative people before.
Yeah.
They don't even know what questions they should be asking you as a designer, which means we have to try and pull it out of them. So the more people think about what those problems are, how to identify whether it's a pain point or a challenge that a client is experiencing, the more confident we become in the solutions that we come up with or provide, but you still have to be able to talk about them
Right.
and you have to be able to pitch them. So I think most of all, I'm trying to instill this ability to speak about your work in an effective way, you know,
Okay.
and it builds trust, right? When you do that with a client, they start to trust you more. And what I tell my students is like, hey, if you know how to talk about your stuff, they're going to trust you and then they will pay you.
Yep.
Sort of what it
'Cause
kind of boils down to.
yeah, because if they can't trust you, they're not gonna write you a check for whatever you're asking.
You know, they're gonna be a lot more hesitant to do it than
Yeah.
they might be.
So have you seen like what are some of the most like rewarding lessons or transformations you've seen in the classroom done by students?
I teach a course called typography. It's like a type 101 class. I teach a second one that's like a type 2 class. But in that first class, I feel like most students have this moment in their like academic career
Mhm.
where you discover typography in a way that literally makes you see the world differently because you're looking at
Yeah.
the space between letter forms now. You're looking at balance. You're looking at hierarchy. You're looking at things you never ever considered, you know, line measure, the amount of leading, you know, just whether or not text is readable. It all starts to jump out at you so quickly. And it's that aha moment.
Mhm.
You could sometimes you see it happen. You visually see it taking place on someone's face in your classroom, or they kind of verbalize that aha moment,
Mhm.
or they share it in like the feedback at the end of the semester. But
Yeah.
it changes the way you look at the world literally.
Mhm.
You become a whole lot more judgy of everything, you know, like
Yeah.
busted ass letter spacing on, you know, highway signage and stuff like that.
Looking at menus, like,
Exactly.
why is what am I don't even know what I'm reading.
Yeah, and we all go through that phase where
Mhm.
we can't turn it off, and it's not until you have enough years of experience that you can start to set that stuff aside and just, like, enjoy being alive or being in a nice restaurant even though the menu's busted.
Yeah.
It takes a while to get to that point because you have to go through that phase of analyzing and, you know, critiquing everything. But I think that's the moment that it's really impactful for me as an instructor because I felt that. I
Yeah.
remember what it felt like to go through that moment and then to never look at the world the same way again. And then to add on to that, I think it's just the transformation that some students have from the beginning of the semester to the end in just like 16 weeks. You know, it can be pretty mind blowing. And you see the confidence, you hear the confidence changing, you see the work getting visually better.
Yeah.
Then
That's
you
dope.
also hear them talking like they're a real designer, right?
Yeah.
You start to hear that transformation. And I think those little things are where, like, teaching is the most rewarding.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That first walking in, like, man, I don't want to do this. And then when they finish, like, so I'm thinking I might want to continue. Like that's those are those moments that I think it's like you got the talent, you got the skill set for it. Now you just got to go out and execute it. So
You know what?
yeah.
I have one more small thing to add.
Go for it.
that I just sort of thought of, but it's really rewarding for me is when you realize that students in your classroom have like you've gained their trust.
Yeah.
I think that you don't connect with everybody in the same way, but there's
Right.
always a couple of people that you really connect with and they really pay attention to what you're
Mhm.
saying and
Yeah.
they believe it. They feel the passion come
Yeah.
from you and the way you
Yep.
teach it. And then it starts to like, and then from that point forward, you've gained their trust and they listen to everything you said, right? And they
Yeah.
start to experiment with some of your suggestions and things like that. So that is also very, very rewarding for me.
And you can tell they're starting to believe you by the questions they ask. It's not so do I do it like this? It's more of, how do I do it like this? I've been doing it this way. Is there another way? Because this is what I'm doing. Oh, there isn't. Like those type of conversations start to happen. And you're like, you just look at them like, oh, you getting it. Oh, you're getting it. So yeah,
Yeah.
I have a couple of students like that too. I appreciate that. And it kind of is a relief for you, kind of as a
Mhm.
teacher, as an instructor, because you're just like, okay, I got at least out of my whole class, I got two. I'll take those two.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to teach anybody else less than I would teach those two,
Right.
but it's a different level of connection. Now I can start to drive them harder. I can start
Yeah.
to push them further and say, hey, you've given me a signal that you're understanding
Yeah.
what I'm giving you.
Mhm.
Now let's see how far I can push it to make you as good as we possibly can and
Yeah.
keep you thinking more like a designer and less like, well, give me the direction so I can get the
Yeah.
grade at the end of the semester.
Tell me I'm doing it right so I know I'm gonna get an A.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's stay in this pocket real quick. I did mention that you're a podcaster yourself. So you host the Student of Design podcast. Let's start from the origin. How did you get inspired to launch this show? And what do you hope for your listeners to get from each episode?
Well, the inspiration definitely comes from my time as a student. And specifically around that time, I was graduating and I was like trying to be an instructor with zero experience. It's right around that time, getting pretty close to taking the portfolio class. Throwback to a previous episode, Russell was in my portfolio class. So we went to school together.
It's cool.
But it was happening around that time. And this was 2008, 2010. So there weren't a ton of places online where you could share work
Yeah.
and that you could get feedback from other people. So I started a really simple Facebook page or group or whatever the hell it was at the time
Mhm.
that was called Students of Design. And it was just a place where you can post resources. Or if you really wanted to, you could share a project you were working on to try to get feedback from other people in the group. And this is sort of something like the podcast. I kept the name because of that original group. And it was 14 years in between that. But it was always in the back of my mind that I wanted to somehow do something else with this thought
Mhm.
at some point in the future. And then when I started getting into podcasting, I was like, oh, eventually I want to have a design podcast. I did a couple of other podcasts before Students of Design as sort of just like stepping stone projects to learn the process and figure out how to do it and not be a dipshit when I did a design podcast. But it really comes from that time. And I think in terms of what I want people to get away or walk away with from each episode, I think it's just some kind of value. I try to have really down to earth, detailed conversations. I try to dig, a layer or two underneath the surface. So I don't really ever ask anybody like, hey, how did you find your style? If it's an illustrator, I don't really ask those types of questions because most people will give you that answer without you even asking that question. So I can ask a layer two or a layer three question that's very specific and it sounds very different from other design podcasts. And that person I'm asking is still going to give me the content from the surface level and then layer two,
Yeah.
if it's like a third tier
Yeah.
question. So it gives me the ability to ask them a question that they don't normally get asked, but then sort of let them fill in the blanks. And they sort of, because people fall into phases of how you answer things,
Mhm.
especially people that have done a lot of interviews and been on a lot of podcasts. And you probably experienced this too from prepping for interviews and
Yeah.
interviewing guests on your own is like people fall into the same cadence of how they sort of present their responses to certain
Yeah.
types of questions. So I try to shake that up, but
Mhm.
back to your question, what I try to give people is just value of some kind, and I sort of try to own and respect that somebody is gonna find value in one episode, and they may not find it in another episode, depending on the quality of my questions or the guests
Yeah.
themselves. And just know that at some point, someone is gonna get value from these episodes, and I think that's where it lies, in just trying to help people reach people outside of my classroom and then just give back to the community.
Yeah, that's dope. Man, I was listening through your podcast and you do exactly that. Like when I was researching you and I was looking through what you do and your portfolio, I was like, well, let me just listen to an episode and see how he approaches it. And we approach it very differently. We're similar in some parts, but your approach, and it had me intrigued. I was listening. I was like, okay, I want to know his thoughts and how he approached this and how he does it, because I was sharing with you before we were recording my approach and why I started it and how things I had to pivot because of certain situations. So I totally get it. What you said 100%, man.
Nice, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Do you remember which episode you listened to? Like, who the guy.
Owen Hammonds.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I
Oh, yeah.
said. There's only one other military person I know that went from that to
That's
to
great.
design. So that's why I was like Owen Hammonds, and he's brilliant,
Yeah,
brilliant.
I got to see him a couple weeks when I was in Austin for Crop Conference,
Oh
we
man,
had a couple drinks and a great conversation about, like, DEI rollbacks and,
yeah,
all the bullshit that's happening right now, but yeah, Owen was one of my he taught me portfolio. Me and Russell were in
yeah.
his portfolio class, and he still teaches at ACC, and just, like,
Mhm.
really talented, experienced guy.
That he's willing to give you knowledge. He's not like
Yeah.
one of those old school, not old school, but like the gatekeepers of design, where it's like, oh, I think you're okay. You know, how some of them are like, it's okay. You just need to polish it. I feel like his is very critical, very detailed. And it's like, and it's coming from a place of, I want you to get better. And I also want you to learn something from this.
Mhm.
What is just kind of like what you said with what you do for your students. You want them to get more than what is just being said. And he does a great, phenomenal job of that. Brilliant, man.
Everything you said are all the reasons I wanted him on my podcast.
Mhm.
100%.
Yeah. So let's talk about your design approach and your philosophy. So how do you decide which projects to pursue, and like what draws you to those particular like forms of design? Because your portfolio spans identity design, packaging design, websites. Like you're a master across a different, all these different platforms. So how do you decide which ones to pursue?
I think these days I'm more interested in pursuing a specific type of person, like a specific type of client,
Mhm.
rather than the actual visuals or even the subject matter.
Yeah. What type of person would that be? Because I think you're the first person I've ever heard say, I'm pursuing a certain client versus this is the kind of design I'm looking to do. Like
Mhm.
what caused that shift? What made you think, okay, client versus project? What made you make that shift?
I think I realized I wanted to take that approach just through working with people that I love to work with and other people that I didn't love to work with. And my work definitely niched down into identity design,
Mhm.
to where that's almost strictly what I do. So
Which
all the websites I take on, or packaging or anything really, is usually tied to a larger identity project that a client originally came to me for. So most of the time I'm seeking strictly identity work, as an independent designer.
Mhm.
Mostly identity work, and it's very reasonable and it's very logical that other pieces are going to connect and sort of branch off of, like, an identity project like a website, maybe some packaging, maybe some other things. That's mostly what I look for, and I think it's just through years of experience that I've figured out that's what I enjoy doing the most.
Mm.
So, like, if you visit my website, like my current portfolio that's online, it's almost all just identity work. So, like, I spent a couple years as a senior designer at Dell. Like, there's no Dell work on my website.
Yeah.
I worked for D&D. There's none of that stuff. There's other, bigger name clients that I have on, like, the homepage of my website, but none of that work is on my website. Like, it's all
Mhm.
smaller clients that are more robust identity projects because I think it is the type of work that I'm trying to attract as an independent designer.
Now, do you find yourself bringing those thoughts and ideas and into the classroom, like helping students understand that, hey, you're designing a typeface, but who's the person behind it? What's their message behind this? Do you bring that same attention to detail in the classroom, and do you find your students becoming more like buying into like the story of it rather than I'm designing a sans serif, I'm designing a serif?
Definitely. I think you have to.
Mhm.
Maybe you don't have to, but I think it's super beneficial to students to bring that type of knowledge and experience to the table or into the
Mhm.
classroom. So what I do is share some of my work that I've done. Sometimes it's like straight up presentation, like decks,
Yeah.
where I'm like, hey, here's my first round. To steal a phrase from Under Consideration. Here's my first round presentation to this client. And
Mhm.
here are the three concepts I showed. This is exactly the PDF I shared with them. And then I'll go slide by slide and sort of give them some insight into how and what I said during these individual pages or during these slides.
Mhm.
And I think that gives them some insight into my thought process. And there's usually some nuggets that they can pull from, and they'll cherry pick whatever they find valuable. But I do think it's helpful to just share what you've done as an adjunct professor because it can have an impact on them as a student. And I sort of live and teach by this rule that you never truly understand how you're going to make an impact on someone's day or someone's life because most of the time people don't tell you the type of impact you make on them.
Right.
And the people that do are the very few people that let you into that information. There's always going to be more. And you just don't know how you're going to affect someone by your approach or what you say or how you say it.
Yeah, no, totally, 100%. And I think that's very brilliant on your part to share with your students like, hey, this is how you do it professionally. This is what gets accepted in the real world. This one may not have been accepted, but you still follow these same steps. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head when you said, excuse me, the approach. Many of them think process, but they don't think approach. They just want to sit down, get on the computer, start looking. And it's like, whoa, 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 slow down. That approach is going to be super critical because that'll determine how much time you spend on the computer. I try to get them to do that. They love to just like jump ahead. And I'm like, research it. Have these conversations, sit down, take your time.
I'm real
So
careful.
yeah.
I'm real careful in the classroom. So like I try really hard to remain objective,
Hmm.
especially in the grading process, which can be pretty difficult. But I sort of hinted at Gail, who hired me as an adjunct professor earlier. I mentioned that she taught me one of the most important thing I've ever learned about teaching before I started teaching. She told me that it's all about the students. It's not about you.
Right.
And it was exactly what I needed to hear before I ever taught anybody
Mm.
at ACC was, oh yeah, okay. I can see how easy you can lose sight of that and you can start wanting students to do something your way
Yeah.
or your influence on their work can be too great that it's influencing their work too much. So I'm really careful to like pump the brakes. And like day one in my class, I'm like, hey, this is what I've done. This is who I am. I'm just one person. I don't have all the answers. In fact, I may contradict a lot of the shit you've learned in other classes,
Yeah.
but I'm just one person, right? And like, none of us know everything. So take what seems valuable from the things I say and find a way to use it for yourself.
100%. Yeah, no, I just say sift it because it's just like you're not going everything that gets thrown in your lap, you're not going to keep. Sift
Yeah.
it. What are they saying? Is there something that's going to benefit you, or is it just something that's just going to legit go over your head and it's never going to make
Mhm.
a hill of beans? So let's talk about your process. Like, what is your process? Because I know you said you take your time, you're intentional. So can you just give us a little taste of what it is if someone approaches you for a new, I say, branding project? What is a typical? It's probably not typical because it depends on your client, but what does your process look like?
Well, I'll talk about the things that I don't think change from client to client. Like they're sort of foundational to who I am and who I choose to work with. And I think this is sort of tagging on to a question from earlier about how do you find how do you start to focus in on the type of client and project versus the type of work?
Mhm.
This for me is where it happens because I will never work with someone new without either a face-to-face sit down or a Zoom call. Like, that's more likely now since, we all got 2020'd and I don't live in Texas anymore and I still have a lot of clients in Texas.
Mhm.
But I will never work with someone new without some kind of face-to-face interaction or doing something virtually because that's where I make all of my reads
Mm.
about whether or not this is a person I want to work with. And I'm obviously looking for red flags in that initial conversation. If money comes up too soon and they're just kind of focused on like what it costs, and I'm like, okay, that's a red flag. Let's keep this
Mhm.
going. And then if I get red flags, I'll start to pressure those red flags a little bit and maybe tease a question to maybe make it a bigger red flag or
Yeah.
find out if that red flag is actually a red flag. I can't do that unless I meet with somebody on a call of some kind or sit down with somebody.
Mhm.
Like I need that in my process to make that determination of whether or not
Yeah.
this is a good fit. And that's how I do it. So that's essential to my process. And then typography is a big part of my output
Mhm.
and the exploration. So if I'm working on an identity and working on logo options or logo directions, I always solve for typography first or make an attempt to solve for type first, especially as a word mark or a logo type. I try to identify what that secondary typeface is going to be, like what the more neutral typeface will be, and then start to build around that. And that's pretty essential to my process. And it means
Mhm.
that a lot of my solutions end up being like typographically heavily
Yeah.
driven at the same time.
When you find yourself approached by these different like companies and brands, do you really look at their mission and values? Does that help in deciding when you're having these conversations?
It depends on the size.
Okay.
If it's someone like Figma, yeah, I'm gonna go look at that corporate jargon and try to get a better sense because I can use those words and phrases to my advantage and sort of like flip them back at Figma and say, hey, here's what I'm trying to do, right? Like you're on a mission to make design accessible.
Mhm.
Okay, I can, there's some alignment with my personal goals and values. If it's someone smaller than that, like I just worked with a lawyer out of Denver recently,
Mhm.
identity package, we did a website, logo, business card, letterhead, stationery, that kind of stuff. Much smaller. So
Mhm.
there's less of like an aspirational vision there.
Mm.
So with that client, because they're so different and the size of them is very different, we don't really need to dig into that mission because there's almost less of a mission there
Gotcha.
with that
Gotcha.
particular client. So it really depends on how much of a feel I get for how important that is to them.
Got you.
And I
Okay.
think this is where it's so essential for my process is to read people. I think I'm pretty
Mhm.
good at reading people, like especially people I've just met,
Mhm.
and I ask a lot of questions,
Yeah.
which is probably why I have a fucking podcast because I ask a lot of questions, right? Well, my key is trying to ask the best questions possible so that I get the information I need to make those judgment calls and to make those reads.
Mm. So how was it working with like Russell and his studio, Studio Dzo, black owned, woman led business? Like you know their mission, I know their mission and values. Like how was it stepping into a place like that?
Easy, easy, man, because it was Russell and it was Liz.
Mhm.
And it was more Russell at the time than Liz, but, like, Russell's one of my best friends, so, like, he didn't have to tell me anything.
Mhm.
We just operate on that level where he's like, "Hey, this is what I'm doing." I'm like, "Okay, I have a feeling of what you would respond well to."
Mhm.
And that, again, is just reading people and having an understanding of
Mhm.
who the person is that you're working with. And that's the best the situation can get, right? Because we went to school together. We lived together. We
Mm.
worked together at Dell for many years, right? So he's literally one of my best friends. So in that
That's dope.
situation, it's the easiest thing in the world, right? I just have to convince him that my ideas are strong and that I'm doing them with purpose. And then obviously respond to his lead, right? And he led the way. I just sort of did and try to match his vibe and what he was after and
It's dope.
try to give him something that I thought looked good because I'll never
Mm.
share work with a client that I'm unhappy with. I've made
Mhm.
that mistake before. But it was also the early days of Studio Dzo. So a lot of the leaning into like the culture, leaning into the values. This is at the very beginning stages of that. So I was
Mhm.
lucky to know Russell so well that I knew that was important to them
Mhm.
from the get go. He didn't have to tell me that. If I was someone who didn't know him, I don't think they were far enough into their own identity and the way it was transitioning to really be able to communicate that to somebody coming in to help them design something.
I see what you mean. Dope. Yeah, because I was just in my research when I found that out, I was like, "That's crazy. He worked for him." And now hearing this, I'm like, "Makes sense." Like, that's always good to have somebody like, I have a good friend, shout out to my brother Chris. We lived together. I knew nothing of photography, and he was like, "Yo, I think you should get into photography." And so that kinda led me into this journey of photography, and I fell in love with street photography, and then next thing you know, I was able to get, like, an adjunct position teaching photography. And I was just like, dope. Like, it was just kind of like having those aha moments with those close creative friends who just get it and they kind of push you. So that's dope. I'm glad you guys were able to connect and work on things like that. So I'm curious though. You've worked on a range of clients. I'm talking about the New Yorker, Dungeons and Dragons. Forgive me, Horse Creek Resort. Like how? Like how do you just range? How do you show that range? Because it's like you're moving so much from, like you said, from small to huge corporate identities. So it's like, how do you tailor your design process to such varied audience? Because the New Yorker is not Dungeon and Dragon. So how do you so how do you tailor those? Like, how do you do that? Like, what is your process for making sure the clients are getting exactly what they need from you?
This is a great question. It's interesting because this isn't something I think about on a regular basis,
Yeah.
to try and like codify what that process is and sort of lay it out all on the table. I
Mhm.
think most of the time it's just me reacting in the best way I possibly can.
Mhm.
And I think it's all influenced by everything that I've been talking about up to this point. So trying to be the most thoughtful person I can be in the
Yeah.
best way I know how,
Mhm.
it starts there. And it
Okay.
starts with a genuine interest and deep dive into what this person or what their business is.
Right.
So it's doing all that upfront work that will eventually put me in the zone of
Mhm.
working in this. And I don't think there's a lot of style. Like there's not a lot of range in my style.
Mm.
It's all very clean. It's all very typographic. I appreciate you saying it's good because sometimes I think my story is like more interesting than my work is, and I like both.
Yeah.
I like both, but there's not a lot of varying styles
Mm.
in my portfolio. So understanding who that client is to the best of my ability, I think is essential for me because when they're very different clients,
Mhm.
most of the time it's going to put you in that lane immediately, right? And
Yeah.
that's a good example, like the New Yorker versus D&D.
Yeah.
Very, very different. So immediately, if I'm doing something for the New Yorker,
Yeah.
I'm not thinking like D&D. I'm not thinking about dragons and shit.
Yeah.
Like I'm not doing any of this kind of stuff. Like
Yeah.
it's on my shirt. I'm already in that lane from the
Mhm.
get go because I understand the expectations. I understand their visual identity.
Mhm.
So that's a part of it too. Just being able to appreciate what they have in place, analyzing it for yourself, sort of breaking it down, trying to, do things like identify the typeface and paying attention to the colors and whether or not there's a illustration or photography and what the styles are that guide those two things.
Yeah.
So once you spend a little bit of time just exploring that, you
Yeah.
now have an understanding of what's going to fit within that visual identity. So you're not even
Yeah.
trying to be fucking Superman and a hero and
Right.
try to do some really technical beer label design illustrations and stuff like that. Like if you're already in the lane, then like the expectations are sort of set. And
Yeah.
then ask some fucking questions, right? If
Yep.
you don't know, if you need clarification, ask them. Ask them. Ask the person hiring you. Ask for their visual guidelines, or
Mhm.
style guide or whatever, and then fucking read them. you know? Don't just get it and then look for, the logo download link and stuff like that. Like, pay attention to what you're reading so that, you don't look,
Stupid.
yeah, you don't look ignorant.
Sure. So let's bring it back one time to your podcast. It's a few questions I had because when I was going through it and listening to it, a few of them stuck out to me. Um, let's talk with let's touch the topic of design pricing. That's usually never spoke of widely. You had a great episode with Matt Thompson talking about this topic. What insights did you pull from this conversation?
Most of all, it was just confirmation and validation of everything I
Yeah.
thought. Not only with his experience and the way that he approaches
Mhm.
pricing. Obviously, when I asked him questions about pricing, I already had a good idea of what he does
Uh-huh.
because he had all that stuff on his website. And I really appreciated that he was transparent with that information and
Yeah.
loved it because, as you said, a lot of people don't talk about pricing enough,
It's
you know?
taboo.
Yeah, there's gatekeeping, or, you're blurring out the invoice number.
Yeah.
And so, like, in my class, I mentioned sharing, like, presentation decks with my students. I'll share the invoices too.
Mm.
Not only say, "Hey, here's a layout for an invoice," and I'm really careful to, you know, as I mentioned earlier, I'm really careful to say, "This is one way to do it."
Mm.
This is how I've treated these situations in my career and what I'm currently doing, and, "Hey,
Mhm.
here's how I lay it out. Here are the numbers." Yeah,
Yeah.
I know those are interesting to you as a
Yeah.
student.
That's all they care about. How much
Exactly.
are you getting paid?
Yeah, it's the hardest part, right? It's the part we all struggle to figure out,
Mhm.
and that's a big these are all big reasons for the reason my podcast exists, because
Mhm.
there are the same questions that pop up from students semester after semester after semester.
Mhm.
So my podcast is really about trying to answer those most commonly asked questions and then dig a little bit deeper, or just answer some of them.
Yeah.
But going back to your question, the most interesting thing about that conversation was what happened after. I got an email from Mark English, who we talked about earlier and who I've
Yeah.
worked with for 2 years, and he sent me a long story. And I mentioned, like, Mark is always has something up his sleeve, and he has, like,
Yeah.
stories for days. He's old enough to be my father, so he's like, he has old stories,
Yeah.
a lot of them, a lot of them. And he emailed me a story about someone that told him a story about a client that they had worked with for a long time. They
Mhm.
worked with this client so often that they didn't even send invoices anymore to, like, get approval on prices and stuff.
Oh, wow.
It was like a very long-term relationship.
Yeah.
But one time, this person's client called them and said, "Hey, I want to call and talk about the price." It was the first time it had ever happened between these two people.
Mhm.
So the designer was like, "Okay." They hopped on a call, they talked it through, and the actual price never even came up in their conversation with each other.
Hmm.
But at the end of that conversation, the client was like, "Okay, I understand. Okay, yeah, sounds good." It wasn't until after that conversation that the designer realized they had added an extra digit. They added an extra zero on the cost. And the
Oh my goodness.
client was willing to pay it after that conversation. But remember, it never came up in the
Mhm.
conversation.
Right.
It wasn't until after that he realized, "Oh shit, I added an extra zero. That must have been why the client was calling me," and then corrected it. He corrected it with the client and said, "Hey, my fault. Like, I didn't mean to do that. This is actually the actual
Yeah.
price." Well, the client says, "Okay, I'll pay you the actual price you want, not the price I was going to pay you with an extra digit." And I think it went from like $10,000, adding a digit on that, right?
Oh,
We
wow.
like probably broke
Yeah.
the six figure threshold with the price.
Definitely. Yeah.
So the client pays the price that the designer actually wanted to price it at. But the reason the designer told Mark English, who's then feeding the story to me after my episode with Matt Thompson, the reason the designer told Mark was because most of the time we don't realize how valuable our work is and how much money people are actually willing to pay for it. And sometimes it can be a lot more money than we think or expect.
Yeah.
And that's what happened in this situation. So Mark was sending me all of this feedback through email after he listened to that interview, basically saying, that's what I just heard on your podcast was you
Yeah.
two talking about prices and you're very clearly undervaluing yourself. So
Mm.
that was like the impact after the fact of that conversation. I was like,
Wow.
damn it, man. So we always have these constant reminders that we're not
Yeah.
charging enough. And then even when you think you're charging enough, like,
Yeah.
7 grand, 8 grand, you're like, man, that's a long ways from 700 or $800.
Right.
But when you talk to somebody like Mark that's been around for decades and decades, you're like, yo, like our work is still way more valuable than you're even
Yeah.
talking about in your conversation. So that
Mm.
was fascinating and impactful. And, I appreciate that sort of thing from him. But this sort of illustrates like who Mark is and like how he's got stories for days and he's always got something he can pull from to like give you value or make you see something in a different light.
Wow. Man. Damn. Just to think it happened by accident and for it to go from an accident to actually being like, okay, you're right. Yeah, I'll pay it. It's like, I could have been doing this all. Oh man, that's incredible. I wish a lot of more happy accidents would happen that for a lot for all of us designers. Oh man. So you also had another chat with your brother Russell. You guys talked about personal identity and confidence. How did that conversation of confidence play a role in your own personal journey?
I think it starts really young. Confidence in my life starts really young because I came from a very broken home.
Mhm.
Both of my parents were alcoholics. My stepfather, he's still alive. He's no longer an alcoholic because of medical reasons. But my mother, she eventually developed cancer and alcohol sort of destroyed her life. So I grew up in a very broken home and I was very angry as a teenager. Luckily, I've joined the military and that sort of like sorted some of that out for me. Now it's really hard to make me angry as an adult. But I grew up very angry as a teenager. And we grew up in poverty. Like we grew up in a mobile home in a trailer park and, grew up like wearing clothes from Walmart and like people knowing at school what I was wearing and not having a very extensive wardrobe. So I'm repeating the same things very often. And when you're in high school, like student,
Yeah.
friends and like the social
Brutal.
world, like people pick up on that and like people know.
Brutal.
So it led me to believe that once I was able to work, like at 16, this is a weird like tangent, but the very first day I started working as a 16-year-old was September 11th, 2001. Was my first day on the job
God.
working at McDonald's as a teenager.
Oh my goodness.
The afternoon after the Twin Towers fell.
Oh my
Anyway, that's a
goodness.
weird sort of like side tangent,
Yeah.
because we all remember
That's crazy.
war at that
Oh,
time and stuff.
absolutely. Absolutely.
But so growing up from nothing makes you worry about what you are going to have, and it makes you more grateful for the little bit of things that you do have. This is why a lot of people hoard because they don't have much. So they're afraid to like part with things. But I knew that once I hit 16, I was on my own and all the money I had, I was going to have to make for myself. I would never be able to rely on my parents. And the situation after that point was like, I supported my parents for many, many, many years, like after I was an adult, making money for myself and stuff like that. So, so financial literacy was never a thing I grew up with. In a lot of ways, it made me okay with money because when you don't have money, you know how to use the little bit that you have.
Right.
But it also instilled a lot of confidence. My mother, she was very confident in me. She would let me be out. She trusted me. She had a lot of trust in me. And I appreciated that much more as an adult. Looking back and connecting the dots, I'm like, man, that's where my independence and confidence comes from, is from the trust that my mother had in me when I was a teenager. And so she let me be out and just said, hey, be careful. And then I had all this weight on my shoulder of like, man, she really trusts me. I better not mess this up.
Right.
And so a lot of my confidence comes from those years. And then I went to the military and not to flex too hard, but I was very good at being a soldier.
Mhm.
It came very naturally and easily, and discipline wasn't an issue, even though I grew up in a pretty broken home. I
Yeah.
fell right into it and I succeeded very quickly.
Mm.
And that only helped my confidence grow because I was doing something that I was good at, just kind of naturally. And all of this comes around full circle to everything I've said about leadership, and
Mhm.
like being able to talk to people in positions of authority and people that
Yes.
outrank you and do that with professional tact. Like all of this stuff connects in different ways, but
Mhm.
that's mostly where my confidence comes from. I think is from my mother who just let me do my thing.
That's dope. Man, that's dope. I feel like many designers are kind of I don't know if you've noticed this, but I've noticed it that in my class, like students lack that confidence. Even if you tell them, "Yo, it's good. I think you're on the right track." They shake. They get terrified. So I think I've there should be a course called Confidence in Graphic Design. There should definitely be a course for that because I
That'd be
feel like
great.
I feel like that would help eliminate a lot of the scaredness, nervousness, anxiety. I think it would eliminate a lot of the anxiety of design.
Sure.
I think for sure that there should be a class somewhere for that.
Yeah. Let me ask you, did you think Russell was a confident person? Like when you met him and like whatever conversation you had with him?
Yeah.
Yeah, he comes
We
across as being confident.
100%. And he's conversational. His energy is not like his energy is very, hey, how y'all doing?
It's the
Good,
opposite.
man. Let me tell you about this. Oh, you're doing that? Let me help you with that. Like he's very open and willing to share. And he's matter of fact, but in the most nicest way.
Mhm.
Like he shared with me like a conversation about what he had with a client that he had to say, you know what, this isn't going to work for us, but hey, I can shoot you to somebody else that can
Mhm.
definitely help you. And it's just like, damn, like you're out here giving away clients. But he was very matter of fact on what he stood on, what his business was, what his mission, what his
Mhm.
vision is. And so I was like, that's the confidence I feel like many designers need because we run into the problem of the value, people devaluing our work, people devaluing us. It's like, well, here's the invoice. Well, can you break down each section? Like, why did this take this long? Like, why does that? I could have had someone else on Fiverr do it for $5. It's like, bruh, you know what if that makes sense, it's like, dude,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I think he does a very good job of confidence because he knows it.
There you
It's
go.
not like it's not like he's talking out his ass. He's
Yeah.
literally what he's speaking on is a professional at it. He's been through it. He knows the ups and downs. He knows the problems. He knows the mistakes. So he's coming at it from a different lens than, let's say, a 2025 graduate coming out as a freelancer,
Mhm.
So the freelancer is going to have to eat crow for a minute before they can get to that. But I feel like if they keep pursuing it and doing it the way, because it would be nice. Like a lot of my confidence came from sports. I played football, I ran track. So a lot of my confidence came from that because it was gratifying. Like you made the catch, you made the touchdown, you made a tackle. Oh, you juked him out of his shoes, you stiff, like you felt it. So you kind of walk with a kind of a different air about you. So I totally get how the military helped you build that confidence because sports helped me build my confidence. But I feel like not everybody's going to come from those rough and rugged backgrounds like we do
Mm.
and have it. So I think I wish there was a way to find a course or
Yeah.
writing material on like how to build confidence in it because I feel like if that happened, a lot of people wouldn't be burnt out by
Mhm.
35, 40.
I'm glad you touched on that at the end because the whole reason I even asked you if you thought Russell was confident is because he's been through adversity.
Yes.
And I consider myself to be a person that's been through some adversity.
Oh, you.
But yeah, there's adversity in Russell's story. Like he had a child very young who has special needs and, things going on with his father and, he's mixed race like I am.
Yep.
Like we've both been through adversity and I think we're both confident people in different ways. And, there's a lot of crossover and similarities, but we have like a lot. We also have a lot in common
Yeah.
in our lives, even though, we're different ages and things like that.
Yeah, no, but totally. He shared that with us when in our conversation, and he even said he's had to take some losses even in business.
Oh yeah.
Even though he's the head honcho, he's had to make some business decisions, you know, that could have cost, but on the back end it worked out fine. Turning down certain jobs even though he knew the company needed, but then something came right behind that. That was exactly what they needed. So he's very much like he's weathered and tested.
Yeah, and you feel it when you talk to
Yeah.
him. 100 passion comes through immediately. Like it's undeniable. That something about
100%.
Russell is just undeniable, and you feel it, and you believe that he gives a damn and that he
Yeah.
cares.
Oh, yeah.
And so
100%.
I think that's where a lot of the confidence comes from, is just like actually believing what the hell you believe,
Yep.
and not kind of faking those thoughts or not trying to believe something that you're not totally behind.
Mhm.
I think that changes everything.
Yep. One last question before we jump out of this podcast segment. How important do you think money management is to designers today, especially freelancers? Because we just talked about the conversation you had with, forgive me, my brain is slipping me right now.
Adam Grayson.
Adam Grayson. Yes, you had that conversation with Adam Grayson. And you also had the conversation with Matt talking about pricing. So now we're coming down to the whole thing of financial literacy, because
Mhm.
many freelancers tap out after 2, maybe 3 years because they just see it just not paying off.
Mhm.
So could you delve into that for us?
Yeah. So before I get there, before I forget, I want to mention Matt Thompson since you brought him back up. He's an independent designer in Austin, specializes in identity, packaging, illustration, and custom typography.
Mhm.
And then Russell, owner, creative director of
Yeah.
Studio Dzo, like super homie, best friend.
Yeah.
And then Adam Grayson is an illustrator and designer from Orlando,
Mhm.
who is currently the senior brand designer at Acorns, which we're talking about
Oh, wow.
financial literacy. He works at
Yeah.
Acorns. Well, I think it's super important, but it's also situational. It depends on who you are, what you're coming from,
Yeah.
what you do, where you live, the competition in your area. I think all of those things will determine like how hungry you need to be. And if you have some financial literacy to sort of create a foundation, I think you're always going to be better off because you know a little bit about managing money.
Yeah.
So me and Adam, who I talked about this with, like we both grew up in like a similar household. There was no financial literacy at all, no financial
Right.
education. Like the talk about money was, is there money?
Yeah.
That's what my parents were yelling and screaming about and, drinking and arguing about. Like this is classic arguments over money with
Mhm.
alcohol combined with that, which is like a recipe for disaster.
Mhm.
So for me, it would have changed my life if I had some of that understanding. If it was taught to me in high school,
Mm.
it probably would have changed my life because I would have started investing in my 20s.
You're right.
So like my
Mhm.
retirement would be completely different than what it is going to be,
Mhm.
because there's no substitute for time in the market.
No.
Like there's just no
Absolutely
substitute for
not.
that compound interest, your money going to work for you, putting it in the right places, doing something like Acorns where it can sort of
Mhm.
yield compound interest on its own. Like investing in crypto, all that kind of stuff. Like I didn't know about that. Well, crypto wasn't around then, but I didn't know those things as a young adult.
Mhm.
I definitely didn't get them as a teenager in high school, but those are the things that would have changed my life. But back to your question about how important it is, I think it just entirely depends on your situation. It's obviously important if you're out on your own and you're trying to run your own business. Like, you know,
Yeah. Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
need money to survive and pay your bills and like take care of your family and stuff. Like, I don't need to tell anybody that.
Right.
Like, we all know, like, there's got to be some kind of cash flow.
Right.
But the importance, I think there's a lot of nuance in how important it is from person to person to person because of that support system that you have, whether
Mhm.
it's a spouse or a partner or family, people you can rely on and count on. I think all of that makes a difference in like how aggressive you need to be.
Yeah. I just asked that because I feel like unless you come from an understanding of money and starting a business, I feel like many freelancers, I think that's where they start to fall by the wayside, is because it's like they might hit that big lick where it's like a 20K job and they're like, yeah, I'm good. But then they forget, like, okay, you got rent, car note, student loans, insurance. Like you start paying stuff and you're like, oh, this is only going to last me like 2, 3 months max. So it's just like, I feel like a lot of freelancers, they get like, I hate to say it, but big headed, because it's like they hit that big one and then they're always chasing that big fish instead of just getting the little fish that can continue to feed and go to the account that keeps it from getting to zero.
Mhm.
So I think that was like a very interesting conversation, because when I listened, I was like,
That
huh.
happened. That happened to Adam.
Yeah, that's why I was like, I never thought of that. But then listening to it and I looked hindsight, I was like, I wonder how many designers themselves hit that lick. And then the next thing you know, it's like month 4 and you're like, "Oh, I haven't had any jobs. I gotta," and then you're scrambling doing $500 jobs to try to put back what you had. So,
You gotta be
that's
careful.
yeah, 100%.
I guess in a lot of ways, me and somebody like Adam, we're lucky that we grew up without money.
Yeah.
Russell too, you could probably put him in the same boat. When you grow up without money, you're forced to worry about money.
Mm.
So it's almost like an indirect benefit that you somehow become better with money because you didn't have it. And when you get it, you're worried about not having it.
Mhm.
Therefore, you start to make better decisions out of necessity and like survival.
Yeah.
So like this is part of my story that I wouldn't change. The part about not growing up with money because it has turned me into the person I am today and how I
Right.
treat money as an adult. And I've only gotten better now that I'm, financially literate.
Yeah. All right. So, Joseph, we have been rolling. I appreciate you. So, we're going to break it up right now. We're going to have a little bit of fun. This is like a little rapid fire session. What comes to mind, whatever you can think of, good or bad. All right. So, I just want to leave this open for you. So, we're going to hit this quick fun round real quick. So, what typeface is slept on but always delivers?
This is hard because I don't know what other people sleep on. However, I would say general category, the neutral sans serif typeface that you use for body text. It's secondary to like the primary typeface. It's not the hero. It's
Mhm.
there to do its job. Things like Roboto or Rubik. If we wanted to dig a little deeper, I'd say Clarendon to give a little love to
Ooh,
like the slab serif community.
yeah.
No, and Clarendon's from the 1800s, man. So like students don't even know about Clarendon these
Yeah.
days.
They're like Helvetica?
Yeah.
Like, no, that's not it.
Yeah, we're going 100
Hard-
years
yeah.
back.
Yeah. Pass that one.
Yeah, and
All
then
right.
yeah, go for it.
Go ahead. No, no, no. Go, go.
Oh,
Yes,
yes.
yes.
I would say this is specifically towards students. I would say
Mhm.
anything that Matthew Carter has made. So like
Mm.
Verdana, Tahoma, Georgia. I feel like these typefaces, they're so systematically a part of operating systems, mostly Windows. Like
Mhm.
Verdana and Tahoma, like those are, Windows
Yeah,
developed
yeah.
for the operating system, but like students will overlook those all the time. They'll grab Futura before they grab something like Verdana.
That's what I was gonna say to you. I was like, "You're the first person that hasn't said Futura. Everybody loves Futura."
Man,
And
I
I
can't
think it's
stand
just
Futura in the classroom.
really?
I
What?
try to steer my students away from it.
Uh-huh.
It's one of the classic typefaces in my typography course.
Right.
We deal with 15 different typefaces, and that's one of the typefaces they can use.
Uh-huh.
And it's fine in that classroom. But outside of that, I'm like, hey, like, stop relying on Futura. Like, find something that's similar, like Neutroface or
Mhm.
something that's sort of
Got you.
Verlag, something that speaks some of the same language, but it's not the same thing that everybody else is using.
Yeah.
But Matthew Carter, I think, gets overlooked, and he's so instrumental, and like he's done so much for the typographic world. And I feel like those typefaces, because they're so ingrained in like
Mhm.
shipping with an operating system, that they always
Yeah.
get overlooked.
Yeah. Okay. What design book changed how you see the world?
I don't think any design book has changed how I see the world.
Mm.
I have an answer, but I don't. I'm thinking of an answer, but I don't think it's changed the way I view the world. Like a book that has changed the way I view the world is 1984 by George Orwell. Like that's maybe my favorite book of all time, and there's no better time to read that than in this world right now.
Mhm.
But like that's a book that could change the way I look at the world. I don't think
Mm.
there's any design book that ever has, but what has gotten close is a book called Designing with Type, which is the book that I had as a student in typography and then became the book I taught my typography classes with.
That's crazy.
So I talked about the aha moment that
Yeah.
happens in that typography class. That book was a big part of that. And
Mhm.
I remember the details and the nuance of, letter forms and just the intricate details of typography and learning it from that book. So that really contributed to my aha moment,
Mhm.
but then also contributes to the aha moments of my students. So in terms of
That's dope.
design books, that's probably the closest.
Uh-huh.
And maybe one other I would throw in is a book called, it's from Rockport, the
Mhm.
publisher. It's called 30 Essential Typefaces for a Lifetime.
Mhm.
and it's 15 serif typefaces and 15 sans serif typefaces.
Mm.
It's basically, showing you a type specimen and telling you what these typefaces were designed for in their day,
Mhm.
what you could use them for, and what they're meant to be used for. And the book is not really anything. It's
Mhm.
for the concept behind writing a book like that that matters to me. That hey,
Yeah.
you can get by. Like you can Massimo Vignelli it and get by. Maybe not one typeface your entire career, but
Yeah.
like if you have 30 to choose from, evenly split between serif and sans serif, like you could
Mhm.
totally work your entire design career for a lifetime and never have to dip out of that 30 essential
That's
typeface
dope.
list. So like that concept really struck a chord with me in that, hey, you
Mhm.
don't really need all that much
Yeah.
to do great work.
So what's a creative hill you will die on?
Creative hill I would die on.
Yeah.
I think it would revolve around readability. I think that's
Mm.
another thing that gets overlooked by students. Like you have yet to understand the true importance
Mm.
of something as simple as readability.
Mhm.
So I was talking about neutral sans serif typefaces, like choosing some shit that is readable, like
Yeah.
setting it at a type, at a font size and pairing it with an amount of leading that people can read it,
Yeah.
or managing line measure, line height. That's like that perfect combination of typesetting, I
Mm.
think is so important to communicate. And at the end of the day, everything we do revolves around communication. And if your piece can't communicate effectively, then what
Yeah.
the hell is it even doing, right? Like,
Right.
it's ineffective and it's going to make anybody's user experience worse if it doesn't prioritize readability.
Yeah.
So I'll,
Right.
I'll die on that hill all damn day.
I think I'm with you on that. I'm starting to notice they're like, all right, you guys, we can't keep like slamming all these things in this space. It's like you have to understand where it's going. Is it going UX, UI? Is it print? Is it business card? Is it screen, iPad, tablet? Like I feel like they're running into the problem of just like, I like it, so I'm gonna put it there. And it's like you can't. Like you can't. Because if they can't read it, they're gonna download it one and then look at it. And then if it sucks, they're gonna uninstall it. So it's like you defeat the purpose.
People get so inspired by David Carson, especially
Mhm.
students, right? When you discover who David Carson is and you see what he did for Raygun and
Yeah.
all that, the experimental phase of typography, like
Yep.
you start to be like, oh, I could be like David Carson, and I can sort of ignore a lot of these fundamentals. If you get
Yeah.
too deep in that and you get lost in it, then you think you can be the next David Carson, and you're not going to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, they won't. You'll be out there talking about, well, he did it. Yeah, but he was doing it when it was fun. You're doing it now because you're bored.
Yeah, and if you probably couldn't do it like him, and
No.
he's one of the few that could and would do it.
Mhm. Last question. What's your go-to to reset when you start to feel that creative burnout?
Video games, man.
Oh, what's your game?
I play a lot of Souls-like games like Elden Ring, Dark Souls, Lies of P. Very difficult, like mechanically difficult games where timing is like a big part of the combat system, like Sekiro.
Mhm.
Things like that where you need to learn a parry system and then you have to sit there and try a boss fight 50 times before you learn all the different move sequences.
Got it.
If we
That's
go further back, it's like Legend of Zelda, and like I'm a Super NES kid and NES
uh-huh.
kid, so like my roots are very much in like Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, and The Legend of Zelda, and
Mhm.
games like that.
Okay. So let's talk about some advice and what you're looking forward to. So what's a piece of advice you wish you had received early in your design career?
I have a piece of advice, but it's not really tied to design.
Okay, just advice in general. We'll
Yeah,
take that.
yeah. Well, if I could shift it, I would talk about investing, which is I was sort of hinting at earlier.
Yeah.
And I mentioned like this is something that could have changed my life, but I didn't understand the impact and the value it could have on the future. So, like discovering crypto and like learning about the crypto space,
Mhm.
back in like 2019, 2020, starting to invest in those types of projects, but also like in a Roth, like Roth IRA and a 401k and things like that, like traditional investing as well, like in, ETFs
Mhm.
and mutual funds and things like that. I didn't understand that. Like, I heard those words growing up, but I didn't really know what any of it meant, and then I felt like you needed to have money to invest money, and that was maybe the thing. If I woulda heard that, like, in my early 20s, like, "Hey, you don't need a lot of money to start investing it."
Mhm.
Like acorns we were talking about, like, you need
Yeah.
pennies, like,
Yep.
extra spare change on acorns, but that stuff didn't exist in,
Nope.
2003.
Nope.
So,
Nope. Nope.
I think the best piece of advice I can give to someone young listening to this is what I said earlier, like, time in the market is everything.
Mhm.
Never try to time the market, and buy and sell at a specific time. Time in is the most important thing you can do as an investor. And so now, like, those are sort of my, investment goals now is like I'm very much like a retirement age investor. I'm a long-term holder of crypto. So the projects I invest in and I believe in, I'm buying them and acquiring them and I'm not selling them
Mhm.
because I'm hoping that 20 years from now the value is going to appreciate and the use cases will appreciate. And
Yeah.
that will actually be worth some stuff that will be a hedge against inflation. And
Yeah.
obviously in hate inflation is, it
It's
keeps getting
crazy.
worse and worse.
Yes.
It doesn't seem like it's getting better anytime soon.
Oh, I know it. I know it very well.
Yeah. I mean,
This housing market is what's really kinda I'm like, "Man, if y'all can figure out what this interest rate is looking at, I don't know who it's looking at because it makes no sense."
yeah, I'm over here like, what is buying a house? I think anybody younger than me, I don't know how old you are, but anybody younger than a millennial.
38. So I'm in
Okay.
that
So we're
I'm
the
in
same
that
age.
pocket.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm 39. So yeah, we're geriatric millennials.
Bad
Anybody
knees, bad backs.
Yeah, I had back surgery in 2023.
Oh, man, I had knee surgery 24.
Yeah, we're broken ass guys.
Right.
No, like anybody younger than us, like I don't know how, like they're not gonna buy a home.
They
They're
can't.
gonna be
They're
renters
just
for life.
and then rent's going up at
Yeah.
at a crazy rate. I'm like, people are just gonna end up sleeping in their cars.
Yeah, and not locked in with salary increases. Like, rent's going up and mortgages are going up, but the salary is staying the same, right?
Mhm.
And tech companies can keep cutting people because they're dispensable. There's always gonna be somebody for a job.
Yep, that's what I'm saying. They're gonna cut somebody that's making 90 to hire a person that could pay 50.
Yeah. So what incentive do they have to increase salaries lockstep with the increase of mortgages and rent? Like, but there's no incentive for them to do that.
No. No, no, no. Because then you're gonna have kids graduating that's just gonna have a lovely paper working at Chipotle. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like you're a communications major, you're a business major, you're a creative writer, you had goals and dreams and they're stifled by a market that doesn't support anything you want. That sucks. That sucks.
But yeah, that's my advice, man. It's all around investing and start investing as soon as you can.
Uh-huh.
Even if you're 35 right now, you've never invested a penny. You
Do it.
don't need a lot of money to invest and to start
Nope.
accumulating, a savings or just interest.
All right, Joseph. So I have one more question, and I was just totally curious about it. Who's an indigenous or Black creative voice more people should be paying attention to?
Well, I think you should pay more attention to Russell since we talked about him.
Yes.
Also, Owen Hammonds, who you brought up earlier, I think you should pay more attention to his work. And then there was this creator I saw at Crop Conference a couple of weeks ago when I was in Austin, Julian Alexander.
Mhm.
Saw him present at Crop and was just totally blown away.
Mhm.
Super, I don't know, maybe the most thoughtful delivery
Mhm.
and performance on stage at Crop Conference. Man, impactful stuff.
Dope.
Impactful stuff. He's a Black creator. He does a lot of work around, I guess, just the idea of racism and oppression.
Mhm.
And a lot of his work revolves around this idea that he's never considered himself 3/5 of a person. So like if you've ever heard of the 3/5 clause, or
Mhm.
I mean, not talking to you, but to people out there listening,
Yeah, yeah.
anyone that ever heard of the 3/5 compromise, like in high school, like he has this saying that really struck a chord with me and like was
Mhm.
super impactful. So he has some products on his site that say that he's he's never been 3/5, that he's always been 5/5. And so when I heard him like deliver that, and not only is the work amazing, but
Yeah.
It's super thoughtful, and I had a chance to talk to him after the conference, like, at the wrap party,
Yeah.
and had an opportunity to just tell him a lot of these same thoughts, like, "Man, I just really appreciate how thoughtful
Mhm.
your work is," and he's the type of creator
Mhm.
that will sit on a piece or sit on a project for, like, an entire year
Ooh.
because it's not the right time to release it,
Ooh.
and then
Wow.
he'll wait for moments in society or, like, in the government or
Mhm.
with the current administration, and then he'll release these things when they have their most impact,
Mhm.
or when he thinks and feels like they're gonna be impactful for people.
Yeah.
So that reservation really spoke to me. I'm just like, "Damn, this is super dope."
Mhm.
Like, you're gonna create something like, because most of us have the urge to create something, and we immediately wanna push it out to the world,
Right. Right.
right? If we're proud of it, if we feel good about it, we're gonna push it
Mhm.
out, and we want people to see it, we want people to like it and things like that. But this ability to stop yourself, to hit the brakes, be reserved and say, "Hey, like, I love this."
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
hitting somewhere for me personally, and I think
Yeah.
would speak to other people, but I don't feel like right now is the time to release it. And so he shared some of those projects, and you can find him
Mhm.
online. He's on Instagram at Slang Inc. And then and also at Supremacy Project on Instagram. And then his website is supremacyproject.com, or at least one of his websites. He's probably got other things going on, but
Mhm.
what he shared that day at Crop Conference was a lot of the work that he's done for Supremacy Project, and like super impactful. And I just really appreciated the thoughtfulness, man.
Mhm.
Really, it was a really great presentation, and his vibe and his energy, oh,
Mhm.
it was top notch.
That's dope, man. That's a true skill and talent to be able to just hold off when you know it's
Yeah.
like burning a hole in your pocket. You're like, "Ooh, I got this one. I could do it right now to him." But it's like timing sometimes can either make or break you. And if you do it right, it can be a glorious, glorious thing. So most definitely dope to check out.
Yeah, and we talked about confidence earlier, so
Yeah.
he seemed like a very confident person, and you need a certain level of confidence to be like, "Man, I made this thing, but
Mhm.
nobody needs to see it right now."
Right.
This is
Big.
trending into, like, artist,
Yeah.
versus designer and doing things that are commercialized.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like,
Yeah.
you have to have some confidence to be like, "This shit I think is dope.
Yeah.
It meets my own personal standard. It makes me feel good. I like the work,
That's
but I'm
dope.
confident enough to hold it back."
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or the opposite, right? Or you're scared to release it. Like, that's the opposite end of, the gamut there.
Mhm.
But he completely came across as someone who's like, "Yeah, you're doing some kickback
Yeah,
shit."
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And even if no one else believes it, you believe it, and it makes you happy, and, like, you feel like it's impactful and doing what you set out to
Yep.
do. So that's where you find your confidence, is in those feelings.
Yeah, dope. Yeah,
Dope,
that's a
dope
must.
shit, yeah.
Yeah, that's a must. Yep, exactly that. So, Joseph, what's next for you? Where can people find you? What's going on with you?
Well, next, I'm transitioning away from teaching and back into working full time.
Okay.
So, like, I just submitted my first application, like, a couple of nights ago for like, a
Wow.
new full-time position.
Well, congrats on that. Let's pray that you get that, man. That'll be
Yeah.
amazing.
Send all the prayers this way. Yeah, we'll see how this goes, because I know it's not easy out there right now for anybody looking
Mhm.
for work. But yeah, so that's the short term,
Okay.
and that's how I would define success right now for me, is like just
Mhm.
getting a fucking job, right? A job that I feel like isn't a piece of shit. That's what I'm focused on. In terms of where you can find me, you can 100% please give my podcast a try. It's called Students of Design. You can find it anywhere. I think if you like this conversation, that's a good, sort of read on what the conversations could be like. But my podcast, it's the opposite. I'm talking 20% of the time, and my guest is talking 80% of the time.
Yeah.
On Instagram, you can find me at Joseph Bullard. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm sort of like playing around with LinkedIn and trying to like
Mhm.
level up that game. I
Yeah.
enjoy it, but it has its pros and cons, just like with
Yeah.
other platforms. But there, and then my website is just josephbullard.com. Those are the
Mhm.
easiest places to find me.
Yes. So, you guys, check out his podcast. And we would like to say thank you so much to listening to this Art School Graduate podcast. My name is Justin Robinson. I have the talented, the multifaceted Joseph Bullard with us. And we'll catch y'all next time. Peace.